Hey friends, I want to make a video about Singapore. I want to make a lot of videos about Singapore, and I've been procrastinating on it because I feel like I'm not a super authoritative voice about Singapore. But I've decided that I'm just gonna, screw it, just do it, and I apologize in advance for all my factual errors, inconsistencies, mistakes. I greatly welcome your criticisms and corrections. And I'm just a layperson. I'm a Singaporean citizen, born and raised, and I just feel like we could and should be talking about Singapore in a bigger picture sense, at a bigger scale. And a part of me is kind of naive and kind of idealistic, but I'm willing to just try it, see what happens, see what people have to say. And the thing that I've learned from making content on the internet is that you do it, people will tell you that you're wrong, and then you acknowledge the correct criticisms and you integrate that into the next level, and then things get better and better. So let's do that. I am a Singaporean citizen. I was born in 1990. My mom was born here as well. My dad moved here from South India, when he was about 7 with his dad. And why did I even say that? It's just for context, I guess. But most people in the world think of Singapore, I think, as, I don't know what they know, but so most people in the world don't know very much, as is the case for most people's knowledge about most countries that are far away from where they live, right? And I think very often there is this kind of So when I ask my friends abroad what they think about Singapore, it's very, there are a few people who know a few more details, but most people just kind of think of it as, oh, it's that city-state island in Southeast Asia that's very, authoritarian and very kind of harsh, and everything's very clean, and everything works very well, but it's kind of scary, and it's harsh on drugs, and they there's no chewing gum, and they cane people and they hang people. There's some truth in that. There's some embellishment in that. I don't really want to get into all of those details right now. I will definitely get into them in later videos. But I guess for this video, I just want to talk about the big picture, the long view, the distant past and the distant future, right? Recently we just had Singapore's 13th or 14th general election. I can't remember exactly which. And it was a pretty cool election in Singapore's history, in that, it's widely known that the PAP government, which is Lee Kuan Yew's party, has had a chokehold on Parliament almost since the beginning. Although, to be a little fact that people sometimes forget is that before independence, the first chief minister was David Marshall from the Labour Front, and the PAP was technically an opposition party then. So it wasn't always the government. It was only after independence around. There's some mess there, and I'm not a scholar. I can never. I've read about this a lot of times, but I can never remember the specifics off the top of my head. I will get into it later on, but point is, Singapore is kind of known for being like authoritarian. Oh, it's like a one-party government, and it's the same party that's always in power. That's true from a certain distance view, but like the reality on the ground is more complex and more nuanced than that. And we do have, so in 2011, Workers' Party won their first GRC, which is a group of parliamentary seats by, again, I don't really want to go into the details of the GRC system for my international friends who don't care, but like basically an opposition party won like 5 or 6 seats in one election. And in this election, I believe we have closer to 10 seats because they won 2 separate GRCs. So I'm pretty optimistic about that, and there are Singaporeans who are pessimistic about that, who feel that the PAP knows best, and the opposition party, the younger generation just wants to vote for opposition parties to see what it's like, because they are all excited for social change or whatever. But they are gonna. We are a small country. We shouldn't risk volatility and change. There's a whole spectrum of opinions on it, and I think very often outsiders underestimate how strong Singaporeans have feelings about the way we are governed. But anyway, that's happening recently and locally. But it was interesting to be a part of, and I was pretty happy on election night, I think. But what I really care about is like long into the future, like 50 years from now, 100 years from now. How can Singapore, my question is like, can Singapore be a truly great city? Like one of the all-time greats. That's my, I'm born here, raised here. I'm a Singaporean. I have the passport. I've served in the military. Every Singaporean male citizen who's able-bodied has to serve national service, which means either most of us serve in the military. You can also serve in the police or the civil defense force. I think there might even be some in the Coast Guard. I'm not sure, but so I have skin in the game in this country. I live in public housing. 80-something% of Singaporeans live in public housing, and I have a strong vested interest in this country and its success. And it's a very small country. That's another one of the things I'm going to make a separate video about. That Singapore is so small. It's only 5.5 million people. You can walk across the entire country in about half a day or a day, right? And it's so small that local news and national news is the same thing. Local government and national government is the same thing. So when I hear American friends talk about, like their state government and the feds, I don't actually understand what that is. I intellectually kind of get it, but to me, the local government and the feds are the same thing. It's a small city state, right? And there are cool things about that. There are not so cool things about that. But I would say, for the most part, having done my reading and asked around and observed what it's like to be in larger countries, and having been raised in a smaller one, I think I prefer smaller countries in general. And I'm privileged enough at this point that I have the option of migrating if I want to. So because my dad was an Indian citizen, I'm technically what you would call, I think right now they call it a person of Indian origin, a PIO, or something like that. And so I would have an easier time than most people becoming an Indian citizen if I wanted to. And I have friends in California and New York who, when I visited California, my friends in the Valley, in the Bay Area, they were like, hey, do you want to move here? Like, we love having you around. If you want to move here, we can put you up, we can get you a job, and if you get a job, Singaporeans have a pretty easy time getting a visa to the US. Haha, visa. And, once you get a job and you have a visa and all of those things, becoming a US citizen would be probably less difficult for me than for most people. It's definitely harder for Indian citizens. I have friends from India who want to work in the US but have a difficult time because it's harder for them, and it's easier for Singaporeans, which is, to the random American looking at me or looking at an Indian citizen, they probably can't tell the difference, which is a topic for a separate video. But yeah, so I'm kind of, I have a choice about where I want to live and where I want to work and where I want to be. And having visited a couple of places, I do want to visit a lot more, and I'm very upset that COVID has not allowed me to travel. But I do think that Singapore is where I want to make my home and my future, and I want to invest in it, psychologically, socially. And so I guess I kind of want to explain why. And I think Singapore, I would say Singapore is a pretty good city. I wouldn't say it's a great city right now, but I think it could be. And so I guess this video is going to be about that. And when I say great city, I mean periods of, and I think different cities have had like their own mini renaissances or their own golden ages. Like at some point Vienna was like the place to be. At some point it was London. At some point it was Paris. At some point it was New York. At some point there are multiple cities in the world. Each has its own personality, its own bunch of interesting things going on. And I would say Singapore is not as interesting as it could be and as I believe it is going to be, right? And so let me explain that. First, I'm going to talk about the longer history, right? Most people tend to think about Singaporean history either from 1965, which is when it gained independence, or from 1819, which was when the British East India Company, Sir Stamford Raffles and friends came and set up a trading post, right? And at that time in 1819, Singapore was ruled by the Sultan of Johor, I believe, from Malaysia. But that doesn't mean that Singapore was always under Malaysian rule, right? If you dig into the history before that, maritime Southeast Asia is a place that ebbs and flows. It was once under the Srivijaya Empire, and it was once under the Mahapajit Empire, Majapahit Empire, right? Majapahit, yes, Majapahit. So the Srivijaya Empire and the Majapahit Empire. I believe one was Hindu and one was Buddhist, and I can't remember from the top of my head which is which. And I will look it up in the comments or something later on. But the point is, the whole Southeast Asian region has always been a place of trade, a place of cultural intermingling. It has always been along a major global shipping route, right, from India to China. And my sense is that it has always been a hustling and bustling place. It's a city in the sea. It's along ships and boats have always been coming in, and in recent times before COVID, planes are always flying in, and Singapore's like our government likes to use the word hub. We want to be like a trade hub or a medical hub. We use the word hub for so many things. It's kind of annoying, but it's true. It's a legitimate aspiration for Singapore to have as a city, to be a hub in Southeast Asia that everyone else around Southeast Asia comes to get a sense of everybody else, right? We have people from China, we have people from India, we have people from Indonesia, we have people from Malaysia, just all around, Philippines. And we are kind of, some people sometimes semi-disparagingly describe Singapore as Asia Light, which is this very Orientalist kind of if you're from the West and you want to experience Asia, but you don't have the guts to go to the really Asian places, then you go to Singapore because everything runs very well. Everything's it's like easy mode, right? Like everyone speaks English. It's the rule of law is very clear. That's there is an element of truth to it though, and I have to acknowledge that. And Singaporeans themselves, not all of them, not all of us might have a global perspective, although I would say our kind of the ruling classes, and I hesitate to make kind of big claims and stuff like that, but Singapore is a city like any other city, and there are social classes and there are different groups of people. So you will hear about different Singapores depending on who you ask, right? Different people have different experiences of Singapore. And, you won't encounter homeless people on the streets very much in Singapore, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. It's just that they are kind of the way that the country deals with people who are who don't quite survive through the social fabric is, there's a lot of pressure on families to take in their family members. It's a small country, and I guess there's a lot of get people off the streets kind of thinking. So it's not just it's a whole cultural thing. You can't isolate it and blame any one part of any segment of the overall social machine, right? It's not the government's fault. It's not people's fault. It's the whole culture is different because it began from different circumstances. And I remember when I visited San Francisco, I was shocked at I was told to expect it, so it didn't completely shock me, but it was jarring to witness the homelessness in the streets. It was jarring to witness people who clearly had mental health issues. I would encounter them daily, whereas in Singapore, it's not like we don't have anybody like that, but I would encounter those people, I don't know, once a year, maybe less. Maybe you'll see a video of someone once a year or something, but it's not that we don't have people with mental issues, but I do think we have a kind of a out of sight, out of mind approach to them. So we have like a Institute of Mental Health, and I don't know what goes on in there. The stories I've heard are not very appealing, not pleasant. But again, I'm sure if you dig into any country's jails and mental hospitals and all of those things, like you'll uncover all kinds of unpleasant things. And this isn't really what I want to talk about in the context of a video, but I guess when I start an ad-lib video, I end up feeling like I should bring in everybody in my head wants to come out and share their piece, and so I allow them a little bit. But let's get back on topic. Singapore, big picture, long history. Right, so most people think of Singapore, I think, as a very strict and very cold, authoritarian, not difficult, but like just kind of austere. What's the right word I'm looking for? Clinical, sterile. So the adjective sterile is often used to describe Singapore, and I've joked before, half joked, that we should use it in our tourism messaging, because if people are going to use it all the time, it's one of those like judo moves where you should claim the thing that they're trying to use against you so that you can nullify its power, since they're talking about it anyway. But yeah, Singapore's sterility, it's not intrinsic to the people. It's not intrinsic to the culture. We didn't wake up one morning and think it's nice to be sterile, right? Like, what culture does that? And I believe it goes back to World War II. It goes back to the Japanese occupation. It's rooted in trauma, basically. And there's something actually quite cruel and even selfish about how, through the Western lens, the exoticizing lens, sort of. And I mean, I kind of get it to some degree. You can't really help but see things. Like if people are not going to open up to you, then you don't know what you don't know. But like, that doesn't mean that there's nothing going on there. You know what I mean? Like, just because a stranger wasn't friendly to you doesn't mean he's a cold-hearted person. He might just be, warm-hearted with his friends, right? And he's nervous about you. So you can't. So there's a lot of, I would say, there's this very strong narrative. Singapore has been trotted out over and over again by Westerners for their talking points, which is something that I have spent so many hours, days probably over the years, kind of arguing with people about these things. Every year or so, there's something that goes viral on. Somebody comes to Singapore and says that, it has no soul, it has no blah blah blah, and I end up having to write freaking essays worth of paragraphs in response to the things that people misunderstand. And I'm doing it now as well, I guess. And I'm trying to be more proactive now. I'm trying to take the fight for truth. Truth is not a right good word to choose, but I'm trying to get ahead of the problem, right? I feel like I've experienced the Singapore that isn't sufficiently represented in the global conversations about Singapore. Everybody seems to get Singapore a little bit wrong in some ways, and I'm sure that my own Singaporean friends will not perfectly agree with everything that I say about Singapore, but probably like an order of magnitude, I will be less inaccurate than outsiders, and that's just always kind of going to be the case, right? So, long history. So I was saying Singapore is sterile and cold, blah blah blah. I think it's a temporary thing. I think it's like a 50-year stretch of people responding to the trauma of war and the trauma of kind of just the occupation, the communist threat, all of those things. And I do think one way of thinking about Singapore is that it's like a country of immigrants, like and in a very there's this whole narrative of like children, how children of immigrants endure their parents' traumas in a certain way. Like, very often immigrants, from India, from China, wherever they go, they, especially those who aren't kind of a super educated, qualified, like blue collar immigrants especially, they tend to have a chip on their back about having had to leave and having been stripped from their culture in a certain way. They tend to the commonplace discussions tend to be that like their parents. There's a lot, you'll hear a lot of immigrant kids saying, my parents want me to be doctors and my parents want me to be lawyers, and like these very high status jobs that make a lot of money. And that's kind of rooted in, like if you flip it on its head and you try to understand where that's coming from, it's that they feel like they don't have much status. They feel like they are economically insecure. They don't have money. They probably fled poverty or political unrest or some kind of difficult, painful, chaotic situation that was traumatic, and they pass on that trauma to their children, whether intentionally or otherwise. And so you get these model minority kids who work really hard to impress their parents or to satisfy their parents, and they don't have much of a social life, right? These are all broad strokes and stereotypes, and you'll find exceptions to these rules, but it's so common to the immigrant child experience. And then very often these kids, when they grow up and they get their A's and they get their top paying jobs and stuff, very often I'm friends with a lot of these people like this, and they tell me things like, I never had much time or chance to find out who I really am, what I really care about, what my passions are. Like, passion was a luxury we couldn't afford. Lee Kuan Yew once had a quote that said, poetry is a luxury that we cannot afford as a country, Singapore. While he himself, read Shakespeare to his beloved wife on her deathbed. Like, he appreciated literature himself, but he felt that the country could not afford that and should focus on these economic, like everything should be sacrificed in the short run for economic growth. But so we have succeeded. We have made that bargain. I have a thread that's something like wait, let me finish my previous thought, which is, so those children of immigrants and stuff, when they grow older and they have some perspective, they have some, if they see a therapist, right, and they just think about what they've been through, they want something better for their kids. They don't necessarily want their kids to become doctors and lawyers and make a lot of money. Although, if both of your parents kind of high status, high earning, blah blah blah, it will feel very natural to kind of want to be something like them. Or you might rebel against them and want to be an artist or want to be something else. And even that whole discussion about artists versus doctors and engineers, blah blah blah, is a loaded conversation, and a lot of the intuitions that people have about these things are based on past realities. They don't account for the fact that like social media and stuff empowers people to reach massive audiences. So you have kids who play esports who make more than doctors and lawyers, right? And that becomes the high status thing to do. Becoming a YouTuber is potentially a high status thing to do and a high earning thing to do once you cross certain thresholds. Not everybody's going to do it, but where was I going with that? So I don't believe that if you look at Singapore in the 1940s and 1950s, there were protests and there was like civil life. There was at Bugis there was this thing called like the dance of the flaming assholes. Like, just it was lively. At some point the nickname for Singapore was Sin Galore. Like, because it was full of drugs and prostitution and it was just, it's not so clear cut. Historically it used to be a place that was much more volatile and there were gangs and triads and whatnot, and I don't believe that Singapore is going to remain. So even in my lifetime, so I was born in 1990, which was right around the time that Lee Kuan Yew was stepping down as Prime Minister, and then but he was still in Parliament as a senior minister, kind of like a man behind the curtain, sort of, right? Like the experienced old man sharing his insights that were very much informed by war and the Japanese occupation, and it's a very bleak, true but bleak worldview, which I think we should always have some of, but I don't think we should always be living as though we are about to face, it's a complicated thing, but there is, I would say the whole country was traumatized and has been recovering from its trauma, and there is a new generation of kids that truly does not relate to what their predecessors did. So, when I was a child, there were whispers about like a culture of fear, like, in the government or whatnot. Like, people were worried that if they said the wrong thing, they would get arrested. It didn't happen as much as people seem to think it happened. It did happen though. There were some people who were detained without trial for political reasons. And I'm not gonna get too much into that in this video, though I would like to go into more detail once I have to reassemble my reading and revisit all the details and stuff. But I'm kind of I guess you could call me a bit of a centrist, like centrist in what sense? Like I do believe that everybody is kind of incompetent in certain ways, like globally, just in the whole world, like left versus right or whatever. Like, in Singapore, for example, people get, like, every so often, like, some blogger gets arrested for defamation, gets sued by like the prime minister or some other minister for defamation. And when and then like foreign countries will report on it saying, oh, there's no freedom of speech, that this blogger defamed the prime minister or whatever. Fair enough. But then you read the blog post itself, which you can, and as a Singaporean, I can read stuff on the internet, right? And I can find whatever these articles are. And you read it, and it's like the blogger is saying, oh, the prime minister, this is what the blogger is saying, to be clear. He accuses the prime minister of like stealing money from, or siphoning off money from the central CPF, which is like the national kind of mandatory savings account that every Singaporean has. And he's saying that he's siphoning off money for his own personal gain. Like, why would you say that? Like, that's such a... I personally feel that's... even if it were true, and I don't think it's true, I honestly don't think it's true, but even if it was true, I wouldn't say that, and that's not just a Singaporean thing. It's like, I guess in any small city state or whatever, but like, it's so unstrategic. It's such martyr behavior. And again, I have disagreements with... I have friends who are activists. I have acquaintances who have been to jail, who've been arrested for, not complying when they want to do a protest or something. And I'm proud of some of them for the work that they've done. And there have been arrests that I feel are not justified, and I would speak up against those arrests, and I've protested myself. But like, protesting in Singapore is a more difficult thing to do socially than protesting in the States, for example, right? Like, I'm pretty sure there's a file on me, like in the, like, just as a prominent Singaporean or whatever. Again, people have disagreements. They're like, who the hell are you? I'm like, okay, sure, you don't know me, that's fine. I don't care. But like, as someone who has written about the government and has protested the government, and I've met my prime minister. He once invited a bunch of bloggers to the Istana, which is like the Singaporean White House, I guess you would say, the presidential grounds. And we spoke, and he's a smart guy, but where am I going with that? I believe that we can make political progress, social progress, cultural progress in every sense imaginable, but we need people to think bigger. That's my opinion, right? I think we need people to think bigger, think more long term, be more strategic. And Singapore is such a small place that a very small handful of people, I believe, can enact tremendous change on almost any front if they're willing to take like a decade to do it. But they have to be strategic, they have to recruit allies, they have to, make the content, share, like so often things happen in Singapore, which is like, somebody decides to start a media organization and they start collecting they try to raise some money for it. They do it for a couple of years, they aren't able to make enough money on it, and then they fold, and then the whole company shuts down, and all the journalism that they did during that time, it just disappears, poof, in a poof of smoke. And that's so unfortunate. That's so wasteful and unstrategic. And you always have to think about your handover protocols. You always have to think about how to pass on what you've learned to the next generation so that you can continue the process of progress, right? But anyway, I'm optimistic about Singapore's future because one, it's very small and it's got a lot of smart people in it. It's got a pretty diverse group of people in it. It does have its its social issues, but relative, it's all relative, right? So to poor Singaporeans, like the poverty is an issue, right? And I would like to see that be addressed. But personally, for me, I'm thinking very, very big picture and very, very long term scale, and I'm thinking about how Singapore, as a Southeast Asian country, right? And the thing about Southeast Asia is it's very syncretic. And syncretism is syncretism. To be syncretic is to be like a real melting pot of, and not just there are many different kinds of people here, but there are like, different ideas melding, right? And Indonesia is often considered a Muslim country, and Thailand is often considered a Buddhist country. Both of them have very strong Hindu roots from Raja Soran from Tamil Nadu, from like hundreds of years ago, when the Chola kingdom dynasty swept through the region. And the Indonesian airlines is called Garuda Airlines. Garuda is a Hindu figure, and if you go to Thailand, you'll see lots and lots of you'll see Indra, you'll see the Ramayana, and it's so, everything's so mashed up and combined and remixed. And to be Singaporean for me has been about living with different cultures. I'm an Indian Singaporean, right? And I have friends who are Chinese, I have friends who are Malay, I have friends from every religion, every race, right? There's so much diversity. It's not as much it's not, and don't get me wrong, it's not a perfection. Again, the thing I'm trying to say is that Singapore is doing pretty well, and we could be great. We're not great yet. There's a bunch of things we need to do to become great, and I want to see us become great. And I think we have a shot because we are small, we have great location. And I believe as the world progresses, right, people who are around the world who are ambitious and hungry and want to see the future, I believe that some of the future of the world will be created in Singapore, being at the crossroads of East meets West, right? We have we used to be a British colony, and so our legal system is of English descent, right? Our food is delicious. The weather is probably the worst thing about it, which is that it's so humid that you need air conditioning all the time or stuff like that. But like just Singapore being between India and China, even just that one simple fact, and Indonesia, Singapore being at the crossroads of India, Indonesia, and China, that alone makes, I think, Singapore likely to be one of the most interesting places to be in the next 100 years. And I don't want to be pushy, but if you are someone in the world and you are considering and you're ambitious and curious and you want to see the world, right, I recommend coming to Singapore. Hit me up, we can hang out potentially. I mean, I might regret making that offer if too many people start hitting me up, but like I think, like when I see my friends in India and in the US who are frustrated, very often what their frustration is that they live in such big countries that you can't change anything. Like it's very difficult to change things. Like there's gridlock and there's just so many people, and politics becomes. I was thinking recently that the bigger the country, the smaller the politics, or the dumber the politics, because the more you pander to the lowest common denominator. In Singapore, we do a little bit of that, but because it's such a small country, right, we can afford to not have to do that as badly as it's done in larger countries. And this is not a moral statement about Singaporean culture versus Indian culture versus American culture. I really think it's just about size, right? And I think, so Singapore has its own military, which is staffed by soldiers like me, right? And I think that's a very important thing for the sovereignty of a city-state. And it's been painful to witness what's going on. It's been sad to witness what's going on in Hong Kong right now. And I don't know the specifics about like Hong Kong's military status, sovereignty, but I am pretty sure that Hong Kong citizens don't have their own military, and that that pretty much. I hope I'm not wrong about that. I should check. Let me Google this to verify in case, because this would be a very bad thing to be wrong about. Does Hong Kong have a military? As a non-sovereign territory, Hong Kong has never had a military force of its own. It's as simple as that. It's really, and I'm not talking about politics, I'm not talking about China, I'm just saying every country needs its own military to defend its interests. It's just the way of the world. I don't like that that's the way it is. I don't like having to cut my hair was gloriously long, and I had to cut it because I had to go for military reservists, and I am very sad every time I have to cut my hair, but I do it because I recognize that I'm contributing to Singapore's sovereignty, and I think that's something that it's a cool thing to be a part of. I think, I would like to, if I could snap my fingers and make the world instantly be a network of sovereign city-states, I think that would be really cool. That's obviously not going to happen overnight, and it may never happen, but it's something to think about. I just think that a sovereign city-state is a great place for a smart, ambitious person to be. And until recently, Singapore was slightly less than ideal for ambitious people to show up, for a certain class of ambitious people to show up in. So it used to be that you come to Singapore to make your money, right? And even in the conventional advertising about, when I say advertising, I mean just kind of the messaging about Singapore. Why am I sniffling? The aircon is making my nose. Excuse me. The conventional narrative around Singapore for some time has been that, it's safe, it's clean, you can make a lot of money. We're almost apologizing for how boring and unsexy we are, right? And in conversations with some smart friends, we tend to find that some of the common points we talk about are, what does it take to make a city really great? One is economic opportunity. You do need people, ambitious people don't go to somewhere where they can't get a job and they can't make money and there's no opportunity. So one is economic opportunity. The other is narrative. Like, you need a story. And Singapore has not... Singapore's story was great from the 60s to the 90s, I would say, where it's a land of opportunity. You come here, make your money, right? But I think money has... we have made our money as a society, kind of, and some people are still falling through the cracks and stuff, and we're trying to address that. But make money as a narrative is not sufficiently exciting for truly ambitious people, right? I think that's what I've been taking 30 plus minutes to get to. Truly ambitious people, they want enough money to do what they want, but what they want is not more money. What they really want, in my opinion, is to really make a difference at a global scale, at a species level scale, to really, improve things, fix things, build things at dramatic scale. Really to see what they are truly capable of, right? And I think that Singapore's next story, which, I don't think will come from the government directly, and I don't know if it will come from the artists, although the artists should be the ones who are leading the charge on this potentially. But and maybe it's a different generation of artists, maybe it's us, right? Pointing out that Singapore can be a shining example for what it means to be a diverse city in the world, right? And what it means to have multiple cultural overlaps and interactions. Singapore is the place to be if you want to see, you can hop over to India, you can hop over to China, you can hop over to Indonesia, you can see what's happening, what's developed. There's crazy amount of development happening in Southeast Asia right now. Vietnam is coming up, Thailand is coming up, Cambodia is coming up. All these ambitious young people are gonna make very interesting things. And you can go to any of those places as well. It's a web, right, in Southeast Asia. And if you decide to make, if you decide to move to Bangkok, right, if you decide to move to Hanoi, we can still hang out. It's like an hour's flight away, a couple of hours flights away. And yeah, I'm trying to assemble, I think, a promising narrative where if we get enough interesting and ambitious people from all over the world to come to Singapore, and we start hanging out and we start having conversations and we start paying attention to what's happening around us, I bet that we can, kickstart something beautiful for the future. And I'm really excited about that. I don't think I've expressed this properly in this video, but I'm going to upload it anyway to see if it resonates with anyone. And I'm going to keep talking about this. And eventually I'll have these, kind of short, punchy, polished, shiny videos. But for now, this is it. Please leave me your comments and tell me what you think. And done.